an introduction. How's everyone doing? So, Strength Chat episode 34, and today I am joined by Bryce. Hopefully I'm going to get this right. Krawcyzk.
That's right. Sounds good.
How are you doing? What have you been?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Stephen?
Not so bad. What's been going on? What have you been up to the past couple of weeks, months?
So for me, I came off of IPF Worlds, Classic Worlds. Came in 4th there, so I was pretty happy with that overall. We can kind of get into that a little more if you want. And went right into my wedding. Was 2 days after Worlds. My honeymoon was about a week after that. So as you can imagine, not a lot of very intense training following all those kinds of events. And since just been kind of enjoying a nice bit of a laid back off season, taking things a little bit easy and, letting some nagging injuries and aches and pains kind of heal up and dissipate, and starting to look forward to get back into real training pretty soon here.
It was you had an injury leading up to IPF World this year, didn't you? You're managing an injury there.
It's been about 3 years I've been dealing with some really kind of random hip pain. It's been there some sessions and not on other sessions, but generally it leads to a lot of inconsistencies in my training. So it's possible for me to train through it, and that's kind of what I have been doing. But it makes my squat training pretty volatile, so it can be hard to anticipate how my lifts are going to go on any given day, which is something I'm not super excited about dealing with on the regular.
How was it competing sort of, I guess, in front of a home crowd at the World? How was that?
That was amazing, man. That was probably, that's up there with one of my favorite powerlifting experiences in my whole career. I mean, I've told the story a number of times, but I'll tell it again because why the hell not? But I had my headphones in. I get really good noise canceling headphones. I had my music just cranked up. I kind of, I threw it on the bar for that third deadlift to try and make it onto the podium. And I remember very distinctly, and I get goosebumps even thinking about it, but I pulled my headphones out of my ears, and the noise in the venue was louder than anything I had blasting directly into my ears. It was one of the most surreal and unbelievable feelings to walk out onto the platform and just hear the whole place just shaking and everybody screaming, and it was so cool, man. I'm so happy with that.
I can imagine in person it was even more awesome. I streamed because obviously the 105s was quite competitive, and yeah, watching it live, you could sort of feel some of the atmosphere. Watching it sort of on my laptop, it was a really good watch. Do you have any competitions coming up or any lined up in the next this year?
So there might be one in November. I kind of bugged a bunch of local guys who used to compete in equipment about getting back into equipment. And they said if I host a meet and it's equipped only and I can get enough people together, that a couple of these, not old timers, but maybe, some of the original single ply crew will get back into equipment for that meet. So I might compete in that meet as well. That'd be in November sometime. But it kind of depends on how the hit goes over the next little while. So if not that meet, then nothing till our Canadian Nationals in March. So long time off.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously I've followed some of your work for a while, followed your YouTube and Instagram and that sort of stuff.
Cool.
And the big thing that you put out there is always about form and good technique. The thing that I always like to coach, and what I agree with you, is that strength is a skill. Yes, you can be strong, but it is a skill you learn how to lift heavier. How important do you think form is, and why is it so important?
Well, I think first off, form or technique is a really sort of individual thing. There are a lot of people whose techniques and the way that they lift doesn't necessarily fit into these nice, neat little constructs that I think a lot of people try to make everything kind of fit into. There's guys like Larry Wheels and Kevin Oak who traditionally are very roundback deadlifters that are some of the best deadlifters and some of the best pound for pound powerlifters out there right now. at least in terms of the untested side of things. I mean, I generally don't really make too many distinctions because I don't really care as long as you play within the rules. But I mean, there are other people on the other end of the spectrum who are technicians, and you look at people like Yuri Belkin and you know, similar lifters. A lot of the Eastern European lifters, especially in single ply, Semenenko and Rubitz and a number of those lifters are very, very proficient. So I think it's more about developing a technique over your career that allows you to, you know, put in enough volume to get stronger and stay free and clear of pain and injury. So I feel like a lot of times as you advance in your powerlifting career, those little nicks and scrapes and aches and pains are going to be the things that define your technique, because you get to a point where you can't squat like you used to, so you have to make adjustments to be able to keep doing it. And that, I think, is kind of the road that, you know, veers towards whatever your technique works out to be.
In terms of across all three lifts, do you find that there's more variation when people are squatting or more variation when people are deadlifting? Because I know from my own experience, I train mainly beginners at my powerlifting club, and there seems to be a lot more variation in their squat. Everyone seems to have a different squat stance, placing in the bar and all that sort of stuff, whereas some people are sumo deadlifting conventional, and it seems a little bit more clear cut. What's your thoughts on that, or what have you seen as a coach?
I would say they're all quite varied. I mean, you have people who are going to be more comfortable with a narrow grip bench, and for whatever reason, you know, that extra length on the range of motion and time spent during each repetition, you know, is a fair trade-off for the ability to do the volume. Staying in closer is easy on their shoulders for whatever reason. And even amongst sumo deadlifters, I have clients and athletes who sumo deadlift, and they have to pull their toes in every time the plates go back down for fear of crushing their toes. And I have other sumo deadlifters whose stance is barely outside of their grip, and you know, any wider than that, and they're in discomfort, or they're causing themselves pain, or losing some of the, you know, the positive sensations of like feeling like I'm doing this right, or feeling like I'm using my legs, kinds of things. So I think it's crazy variation on all three lifts, I think, in my opinion.
Okay. So would you ever, because I can probably count on one hand the people that I have changed their technique. One is a girl in the powerlifting club, and conventional just seems really, really awkward. Swapped her to sumo, and deadlift is absolutely flying it. Whereas some people, there's another guy at the bar, he doesn't look as though it's resting straight on his back, but yet his squat is solid, and the weights are still going up. He doesn't get any pain. There's no discomfort. What are your thoughts on actually changing people's technique, or, you know, giving them a different variation?
I think that generally speaking, I mean, it sounds like we kind of subscribe to the same sort of rule set. You know, if somebody's making progress, if their lift isn't expressing some sort of incredibly obvious and very deficient pattern, like if you're going through a squat and your whole back is folding over every rep, you know, there's probably something we need to do there. There's probably some adjustments we can make. If you can't hit depth, we need to work on that. And it also depends on the experience of the lifter and the lifting age. I hesitate to make changes to lifters who have been lifting for longer, or at least the magnitude of those changes will be much less in the technique of a lifter who has an older training age. So, I mean, yeah, the general rules are if you're getting stronger and you're not getting hurt, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you end up stagnating for a period of time, you know, as a more advanced lifter, then maybe it's time to start looking at some different grip positions or different setups, different cues, and those kinds of things. And a lot of times, just cueing a lifter might not even be a very visible thing, but just in terms of their concentration during a lift can really help change that skill component.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm not going too far wrong then. I was worried you might turn around and say, "Oh, no, don't be doing that."
No, that all sounds right, man. If you can get stronger and not get hurt, you're probably on the right path.
Good. So you touched on it a little bit there, sort of more advanced lifters maybe not changing too much because obviously they've got to quite a high level. Is there common themes that you see in certain lifts where there are common mistakes that you see? And are they the same for a beginner lifter or an advanced lifter, or the size of that discrepancy in the form, does that change? What have you seen with that?
I mean, again, it's kind of hard to make hard and fast rules, but as a generalization, I would think that one of the biggest things that is kind of a hot topic in conversation is roundback deadlifting, right? So if we're seeing a lifter deadlift and their back is kind of doing the pool noodle or the fishing pole, whatever you want to call it, and to what magnitude that happens, and how strong they're able to be, how well they can tolerate volume among the while using that kind of technique, again, will kind of dictate how much or whether or not I'll change it. I've had some lifters where it's gotten to a point where, they are a round back deadlifter and we've progressed. We've made a lot of gains in their strength. Generally with a round back deadlifter, I'll strive to try to get them a little bit more extended, but a round back deadlifter is kind of just going to be a round back deadlifter. In my opinion, it's a very different pattern than somebody who's a more flat back deadlifter. If said person is a round back deadlifter and they start running into back injury after back injury after back injury, and they're starting to have pain on a regular basis, and a lot of those things are sort of stacking up, then it's like, okay, maybe we dial it all the way back. We drop to 135. We look at switching to sumo or switching to conventional. We make some larger changes in how you're deadlifting, because clearly this is, we're just running into that wall over and over again. But I also have round back deadlifters who are incredibly strong, very resilient in those positions. If you watch any of our Form Check Fridays, I preach a lot about trying to get people into more neutral spine positions. Most of the time, that's because I could tell that we're dealing with a sort of beginner population, or a more sort of early intermediate, generally speaking. But if I have a round back deadlifter who's doing great, no issues, making strength gains, tolerating the volume, all those kinds of things, what I'll generally do is try to challenge that last little bit of lockout even a little bit more, because that's generally where we'll see those round back deadlifters struggle, is like right at the top, trying to straighten the back. So I'll start overloading the top end with bands and chains. I'll have them pause a little higher up in the range of motion, right where things start to break down, or just before things start to break down. And I'll just treat that as a weaker point or range of motion in the lift, and attack that as opposed to trying to rewrite their whole technique. So again, very case by case, and I ended up with this long-winded response, but that's kind of how I deal with it.
Good. Okay. You said there about especially as beginners, do you think if all of those factors, round and back, leaning forward in the squat and all this sort of stuff, do you think if that's nailed as a beginner, it's less likely to have impacts as the more they've got progressed? I know for me, as an example, my squat, as soon as I got over a certain amount of weight, it basically turned into a good morning. I used my flat rather than my quads a little bit. But as I've got stronger and worked on it a little bit more, my squat's actually flown up. It's a little bit stronger. My back's staying a little bit straighter, and that's ended up me now qualifying to compete at nationals. It takes me a long time to do that, but do you think if you spend a little bit longer getting that nailed as a beginner, it's less likely to happen as an advanced lifter? Or do you think there'll be other problems, or there'll always be things to work on as an advanced lifter?
So, I mean, kind of yes to everything there. There definitely will kind of always be things to work on. I have competitors that are at an international level in the IPF, and we're still kind of tweaking things every so often. And, there's always new things to focus on and different challenges to try to work with in a sort of coaching relationship and as an athlete. But definitely, I think that there is more of a return on investment, if you want to put it that way, to really hammering in some of these common technical flaws as a beginner lifter, because a lot of times it's less a matter of, oh, you're going to get hurt if you do it this way, and more a matter of you can train your body to be more efficient if you do it this way. And again, that's going to be very case by case. Some people can squat morning a lot of weights and not run into any issues, but generally speaking, if I see a beginner who's just learning how to squat, and the knees are caving, shooting backwards, hips are shooting up, and we're kind of good morning-ing the weight. That's something that's pretty easy to fix, and more often than not, I think is worth spending that little bit of time and that little bit of investment early on to try to develop a bit of a more efficient technique.
Yeah, I think a key there I know what I've found and what I try and get across to beginners to our training is powerlifting. You've sometimes got to be a little bit patient, sometimes take one step back, rebuild, and then go forward a little bit. You can't keep going forward and going forward. So at some point, you're gonna hurt yourself. Like you've mentioned quite a few times there, being efficient, making sure that there's no pain. Mm-hmm. In terms of actually fixing issues across the three lifts, do you have any go-to fixes that you commonly use, or through this you've said it's based on the individual, but have you found that there's some common themes that work really well in fixing some issues across the three lifts?
I could probably give you a breakdown of my single most common cue in each of those lifts. Yeah. And if I was to do so, the squat, usually we're ending up in a bit of a squat morning. We're starting to maybe see that bar roll. So one of the biggest things that I'll try to coach newer lifters to do is to keep the knees forward out of the hole. So to try to make sure that we're not seeing the knees shoot back and forcing the hips up. Just kind of learning to put yourself in a better position so your quads can contribute a little bit more to the lift, and potentially training the quads and making the quads stronger. I think is one thing that is often an issue with beginner lifters. In terms of the bench press, my favorite bench press cue is probably to try to get lifters to visualize bringing their chest up to meet the bar. And in my opinion, that does a whole bunch of different things in terms of tightening the upper back, holding the shoulders into position, as well as trimming the range of motion. I mean, if you can get that extra half inch or whatever by literally bringing your chest up to the bar, it can help. In terms of the deadlift, maybe two biggest things that I see are trying to figure out or learning or getting the lifter to comprehend the idea of pulling the slack out of the bar. So not jerking into it and hearing that bar go click and having that sort of jolting motion at the beginning of the deadlift, rather kind of easing into it. And the other really, really big cue that I use is to push the bar off the floor. And I think this applies both conventional and sumo deadlifts. If we can get the lifter to maintain the same back angle they start with and kind of push to begin and then start pulling back, I feel like generally that leaves people in a better position throughout the first phase of the lift and as they transition into the second phase of the lift. So those would be my big ones.
I'll be pitching up some of those cues for the Monday night powerlifting session.
There you go.
So for, obviously you mentioned cues there. In terms of exercises, would you have to actually see the person lift before you start giving them variations? Or I know for me sometimes I've always where they struggle with the lift is sometimes their weakest point. So I'll give them variations, maybe for people who are pushing to compete a little bit more, where they're spending a little bit longer in the places that they feel uncomfortable with. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any exercises for that? Is that the route you go down?
Similar, yeah. I think I have kind of different reasons I'll use different exercises, but definitely pauses at different points in the range of motion can have a ton of different utility. For a squat, generally your sort of pause squat and pause in the bottom of the range of motion is going to help people build a little bit of comfort with that part of the range of motion, help them figure out where they should be on their feet and what that's going to feel like in the bottom of each squat. Long pause bench press is something that I find really useful, as well as pause deadlifts. I would say most of my clients, most of my paid form checks, most of the people that I critique on the internet, I recommend pause deadlifts for a lot of people, because I would say, 6 or more times out of 10 when I see an issue with the deadlift, it's in that initial few inches of the range of motion. So if we can get people to be more conscious, more focused, and more efficient through those initial few inches of the range of motion, a lot of times that leads to a better deadlift overall, because the deadlift is so dependent on those initial, that start of the lift.
Yeah. Okay. I know I've been programmed pause deadlift, pause squats myself, and I've programmed them as well. Yeah, it's good to see the reasoning behind that. Yeah. So we chatted there a little bit about adding exercises into a program, and this was sort of a last minute that I wanted to chat about, just because I saw your story on Instagram yesterday, basically about there is quite a lot of free content out there. There's quite a lot of programs out on the internet, and I know for me as a powerlifting coach, it helps me have ideas to put into my program. You know, you pick from different coaches and put your own spin on it, because obviously from a selfish point of view, I want to be known as a coach in my own right. What is your opinion on people getting programs and basically just giving them to people? What was sort of the point behind your story on Instagram?
So I had somebody reach out to me via email. I mean, I don't really go around trying to hunt down people that are using my program or calling it something that it's not. It's a free program. It's out there on the internet. You know, stuff's gonna happen. You know, people are probably gonna, and because it's a free program, it's intended to be shared around, right? Like, I want people to say, hey, like, I did this program, go check it out. But somebody was sold essentially my program as a custom training program from a coach. I ended up talking to this guy a little bit, the guy who was sold the program, who received the program as coaching, and he sent me a copy of it, and it was literally like, it was ripped right out of my spreadsheet. The coloring was the same, the formatting was the same, 70% of the exercises were the same, and it was just like, it didn't bother me at first. I was just kind of like, you know, this stuff's going to happen. Unfortunately, in the age of the internet, things are going to get shared around. Some people are going to try to take advantage. And the big thing is that these coaches who do these kinds of things, they're not going to be able to take their athlete very far. I mean, they're not going to be able to take an athlete any further than a free program on the internet, literally. So those coaches will either smarten up and stop doing that and get better and become better and learn, or they'll fizzle out and find something else. So that was kind of a big part of my initial mindset, and then I kind of dwelled on it a little bit and started to get a little bit revved up and a little bit annoyed that somebody had done this. So I think I'll probably reach out to the person who sort of perpetrated this act and see what their situation is like, why they may have done that. I think my end goal in dealing with that would be to convince this person that was a stupid thing to do and that they shouldn't do it anymore. I don't feel the need for any sort of vengeance. I'm not trying to like ruin anybody's career. I'm not going to blow them up on social media or whatever. I just would like this person to not steal crap anymore. Just be better, you know? And I've talked to a number of people on social media about it now, because I had a number of people reach out after I posted that yesterday. And I think that if you were starting out like I was at one point, and you took 5-3-1 and you said to your client, this is 5-3-1, we're going to do this because I think it'll work, and I'm going to help coach you through it and figure out how to modify the program and manipulate it based off this program, and you're not paying for this, I'll tell you where to find it on the internet, you know, and just kind of approach it a little bit differently. I don't have any problem with that, because everybody starts somewhere, and maybe you want to run a template with your client, and I don't think that's a big issue. If you're, you know, just getting started, you're maybe not sure where to go for programming, that kind of stuff is fine. I mean, I definitely put clients through 5-3-1 like progressions, but I didn't charge them for that and say it was mine and say it was custom. And I think that's where the big distinction is.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are programs out there and they do work, you know, 5-3-1 all them sort of programs. But the thing that I took from that when I saw the story posted, that's not in the best interest of the lifter. And I think with those programs, I've heard it from other lifters who have different coaches to me. They're still training in the gym, but they've got their coaching from somewhere else. And even if the program is causing them pain or they're not really getting results from it, no, just stick to the program. You'll get where you need to be, assuming that program is hopefully going to help them. I know, and I'm sure you're the same. You'll have a template to work off, but then from there there'll be loads of variations of how it can change to that lifter.
Absolutely.
In terms of the person actually getting the program, do you send your programs out monthly or weekly? How do you change it to suit the lifter? Because obviously that program there is out there as a free program. Obviously try that. Would you then give them a block of training and change it when they comment on things, or would you send them a program weekly and change it?
So personally, I send out programming monthly. I'll send out a month block of programming with a certain intent and expectation, and based on weekly feedback, I'll just make modifications to the program if and when necessary. I think it's interesting you bring up that some coaches will say, stick to the program. I know you're in pain. I know you're not getting anywhere right now. And I think in some situations that's warranted. I think in some situations, you sometimes just need to see it through. And there are other situations where you need to break down and modify the program, change things, add things, take things out. And I have a bank of programs that I've written and used and had success with. And sometimes when I start with a brand new lifter, I'll take one of those, I'll make a few changes to it, and I'll send that out and see how the person reacts to it. I think it takes time to develop the individualization, and it takes time to learn your lifter's tendencies and your lifter's needs specifically. So a lot of times a templated program isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's the ability of the coach, and the job of the coach needs to be to make those modifications, make those changes, develop a data set, and learn to modulate the programming as needed by the athlete.
Yeah, I know from what I've seen, I've had programs that have had loads and loads of stuff in, and I don't really respond very well to that. I need it a little bit shorter. But I've seen some guys that you can see that they're just fatigued through the session, but yet they still get programmed a hell of a lot of stuff in there, and it doesn't change as much.
Mm-hmm.
When people are, because obviously usually it's beginners that look for programs out there, would you recommend them looking for these programs and doing it themselves, getting to a point where, okay, I've had some success from this, and then looking for a coach, or what's your take on that?
I generally think that a beginner powerlifter is best suited to just go and find some local powerlifters first. Go and find some people who kind of know what they're doing, get around them, get involved in the culture, because that's one of the beautiful things about this sport is the people that you do it with. And support a local gym that's going to support powerlifting, and find people near you if you can. I know not everybody lives in an area where there is powerlifting. If you can do that kind of thing, it's going to help a lot. If not, maybe check out Form Check Friday sometime, or something like that. That's one of the biggest reasons, and I was talking about this on the live stream last night, just about how the whole reason we wanted to do Form Check Friday is because when I first started lifting in a commercial gym by myself, knowing jack all, I wish somebody would have said, dude, that looks so whack. Yeah. That's not right. You need to fix this, and this. Because I had to kind of learn myself, and I luckily I ended up in a pretty good spot with things. But I wonder sometimes, and not very, I don't put a lot of weight on this, but I wonder sometimes if I could have been further ahead or better had I had some sort of guidance or direction early on. I would say that beginner lifters probably don't need to go out and spend a bunch of money on an online coach right out of the gate, but maybe there's beginner lifters that the first time they get under a barbell, they're already squatting, 365 or 160 kilos, and they're like, oh, well, I want to be competitive now. And in that case, obviously there are scenarios for both sides, but generally just go try and get involved locally, find somebody who knows what they're doing, and try to learn what you can.
You've sort of jumped the gun on the last question I was going to ask there.
Okay.
Advice on that, but you know, when people are looking for programming, and I like it, my bread and butter is training beginners, if you like. Obviously, I want to start taking them to competitions and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
People looking for programming, for coaching, for powerlifting, for strength training. What would be your tips, your advice when people are going out there and looking for to get involved with some coaching for powerlifting?
I would say like ensure that you check credentials. And it's not that everybody needs to have a 4-year university diploma, or 4-year university degree to be a good powerlifting coach, or needs to be like an IPF world's medalist to be a powerlifting coach. I think that there are a lot of great coaches who aren't necessarily athletes even at all. But I think seeing some sort of credentials, some sort of education, or at least the, what am I trying to say here? At least somebody who wants to learn or is learning, actively learning about the sport or involved in the sport. Look at the athletes that they already coach. If they coach any, do they fit what you are or what you would like to be? You know, I looked at when I started working with Mike Tashir, I saw he was coaching a whole bunch of raw IPF powerlifters who were successful on an international level, and I was like, okay, like he's experienced with the demographic that I'm looking at, that I look to become a part of, or I'm on the verge of becoming, or trying to, whatever. So look at who they train, look at their credentials. I would say be wary of coaches that reach out to you. I feel like a lot of times if a coach is going around soliciting to a bunch of people, it could potentially be not the best scenario for somebody. I can't say that every time a coach has reached out to an athlete, they're not a good coach. That's definitely not where I'm getting at. But yeah. I think there are a lot of coaches that go around and try to cherry pick athletes, and they're like, oh, hey, I'll give you a deal and blah, blah, blah. And maybe it's just the marketing tactics that I disagree with. I don't think that makes them a bad coach, but yeah, I think that you should kind of just let your work speak for you.
Yeah, I know for that sometimes there are people out there who are crazy natural strong. Sometimes there's too much to help with them. But for me, I took a lifter up to just a regional competition, first competition, and he only missed one lift all day, and that was because he missed the command and stepped forward.
Yeah.
I was gutted because it would have been a PB, but it was great to take them from someone who not necessarily had done a lot of powerlifting, had been around, and take them to a full competition and take them there. Obviously, he can now go on and maybe progress, and I think having that foundation, I can build on him getting stronger. I took him from something relatively new and took him on there, and I think you can rush sometimes to try and get people to be, oh, I've coached so-and-so, I've coached so-and-so, whereas, it's the people maybe at the bottom who are starting out that have allowed you to get so far to where you're at.
Absolutely. One of the first big meets that I coached at, I think I had 11 or 21 lifters. I can't remember which, maybe 16, somewhere in that range. And it was madness. It was one of the first meets I coached. It was a lot of my friends and stuff. I had made a lot of friends at the gym. I was working at a commercial gym. A lot of these people were powerlifting for the very first time. And it sounds like, I think when I was starting out, you and I had a lot of similarities. It was about, taking people who maybe had a little bit of experience lifting weights, getting them doing the powerliftings, getting them doing powerlifting training, taking them to a meet, and kind of introducing them to their first experiences there. And I think that by learning with beginners as a beginner coach, it just kind of pairs up all the way up. As you become more advanced as a coach, your athletes become more advanced, and it grows at a sort of organic rate. So yeah, I would say that look for a coach who's coaching people of a similar skill and goal set of yours.
So anyone watching, there's some top tips for you there. I know for me, all the way through this episode, it sort of reassured me that I'm not good doing things too far wrong. Trying to make a name as a powerlifting coach. For anyone who maybe wants to ask you a question or look at the form or maybe even get involved in some coaching with you, where can people find you and get in contact with you?
So you can find me, I'm probably mostly present on Instagram and YouTube. We're Calgary Barbell on both of those. I just created a personal Instagram page, so I'm going to be posting all my lifting on there and all my training and a little bit more about my personal life and those kinds of things. And the Calgary Barbell page will be more for the entirety of Calgary Barbell, which is kind of becoming more things, very exciting for me. We are at calgarybarbell.com. We're Calgary Barbell on YouTube and Facebook. Literally Calgary Barbell, wherever you want to find us.
For those people watching, definitely check out the Form Check Fridays. It is really interesting. I know I've really enjoyed chatting to you today. Thanks again for taking the time to chat with Bryce. Thanks to everyone watching, and I will see you all next week.